Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Bill Roach. This is another episode of Timeless Dialogues, and today we're going to look at just something a little different. You know, a lot of the things that we try to discuss are topics related to theology, philosophy, apologetics, and various topics, but what I want to do is discuss something related to the family and the concept of family worship, and what that might mean for you and for your church, and for the people that you know in your extended family. So a few things before we start. One, I want to point something out that's glaringly obvious. If you look right about there, I got a little bump on my nose because I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that just comes with the territory. So sorry if that bothers you. I would rather make this video than wait however long it's going to take in order for it to heal. And I'm not going to put makeup on to cover it up. So I'm just going to be straightforward with that. So glaringly obvious, want to point that out to you. So let me give you a little bit of background about what we're going to do here. Is recently my wife and I, we attended this marriage seminar, and they had various speakers that were there, one being Scott Brown, another one being James Dome, another one being Joel Beakey, and it was a marriage seminar designed to set good foundations for different families for issues that they're going to sort of face. And they had a very specific focus on like the first 10 years of marriage. So my wife and I will be married 10 years this June, so we kind of just snuck right in. But all in all, what they were trying to do was bring us back to a biblical view of marriage and to, quote, reform our understanding of marriage. And what I want to do is talk about a few of the resources that we got there, and I want to point to actually the MP3 audios of the message itself. So I'm going to actually pull up the link to the audio here so that you can see it, and I'm just going to take the full screen. So what you're going to find on this website is that it's with Church and Family Life, and they have various different topics and various different things that you can engage with. And some of the topics were this that we'll see here. I'm just going to scroll through. One by Scott Brown titled Getting the Picture Right, the Most Important Things in Your Marriage. He also did another one called Don't Be Hard to Live With. And my wife kept poking me in the ribs for that one. I can't figure out why, but maybe I'll figure it out at some point in time. But some of the ones that I want to also look at were these messages by Joel Beakey, who is really just a world-renowned Puritan scholar, and he had 4 different messages. The first one was this idea of scriptural mutual obedience, another one on scriptural mutual duties, and then he looked at the scriptural duties of the wife and the scriptural duties of the husband. And also, just so you can see it here, Jason Dome gave one on 1 Corinthians 13 as a guide for marriage. Each one of them were really good, but what I liked the most were actually some of the ones that came from Joel Beakey, not to like downplay the other ones, but it was just because Beakey resonated with a lot of the topics that I enjoy discussing, and he also brought his rich Reformation Puritan background as clear examples and illustrations of what he was trying to do. So I really would recommend that you go and listen to all of these messages. And I really highlight the ones by Joel Beakey. So again, it is Church and Family Life and the resources. This just came out. So no further ado, I want to look at a couple other resources that they had here. Like I said, this is just going to be one where we're looking at books and different topics and things. And one that I want to recommend here is a book titled Family Worship by Joel Beakey. And what I'll do is I'll try to put links to some of these, including the website below in the description. And the reason that I like this book, and I've read through it, is that he lays out in very clear and concise ways. The book is 66 pages with all the bibliography and everything included. Really just this robust theological and biblical argument for not only why you should do family worship, but what it is and what it looks like and how you can implement it into your family. So what I want to do is just read a few things here. And starting out, theological foundations for family worship. He says this: every church desires growth. Surprisingly few churches, however, seek to promote internal church growth by stressing the need to raise children in covenantal truth. Few seriously grapple with why many adolescents become nominal members with mere notional faith or abandon evangelical truth for unbiblical doctrine and modes of worship. He goes on to say this: I believe one major reason for this failure is the lack of stress upon family worship. In many churches and homes, family worship is an optional thing. or at most a superficial exercise such as a brief table grace before meals. Consequently, many children grow up with no experience or impression of Christian faith and worship as a daily reality. And he goes on to say, when my parents commemorated their 50th anniversary, all 5 of us children decided to express thanks to our father and mother for one thing without consulting each other. Remarkably, all 5 of us thanked our mother for her prayers, and all 5 of us thanked our father for his leadership of our Sunday evening family worship. Now, he goes on to say that family worship is something that should be done daily. And one of the things that he looks at here is just the truth of what it looks like. And he goes on to say this whole idea of revival today. He goes, would we see revival among our children? Let us remember that God often uses the restoration of family worship to usher in church revival. For example, in 1677, Church Covenant of the Puritan congregation in Dorchester, Massachusetts included the commitment to, quote, reform our families, engaging ourselves in a conscientious care to set before us and to maintain the worship of God in them, and to walk in our houses with perfect hearts in a faithful discharge of all domestic duties, educating, instructing, and charging our children and households to keep the ways of the Lord, end quote. So he goes on to say this, as goes the home, so goes the church, so goes the nation. Family worship is a most decisive factor in how the home goes. And he goes on to say, family worship is not the only factor, of course. Family worship is not a substitute for other parental duties. Family worship without parental example is futile. Spontaneous teaching that arises throughout a typical day is crucial, yet some times of family worship are also important. Family worship is the foundation of biblical child rearing. And then what he does throughout the rest of this book is he gives a clear theological foundation for it. He looks at the duties, the implementations, objections, and motivations. And I think some of the ones that are of most important are the theological foundations and the duties, but also implementation. Now, one of the things that I like about this book is I was not raised in a family that did family worship. I was not raised in a family that read the Bible and had what he would lay out here. So in many respects, I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't understand what that looked like or how to actually implement it. So if that's you, well, join the club. Second of all, I would encourage you to pick this book up and use it as a guide to understand what it might look like to actually have family worship, which is really a way of teaching your children and your wife what it means to know the Bible, to interact with the Bible, to apply the Bible, to confess sin, and really just grow and mature as a Christian. It's setting that example before him. Now, I just want to look at a few things here on just this idea of the father's leadership and role, is that there, in many respects, it is the father's representational duty to not only lead his wife, but to lead his children. And I just want to look at a few of these. I know that we have quotes here today, and then we're just going to look at a few other books. And he goes on to say, the theological foundations of family worship are rooted in the very being of God. The Apostle John tells us that God's love is inseparable from his triune life. God's love is outgoing and overflowing. It shares its blessedness from one person of the Trinity to the others. God has never been a solitary individual lacking something in himself. The fullness of light and love is eternally shared among the Father, Son, and Spirit. But notice what he says here. He says, the majestic triune God didn't model himself after our families. Rather, he modeled the earthly concept of family after himself. Our family life faintly reflects the life of the Holy Trinity. That's why Paul speaks of the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, of whom the family in heaven and earth is named. The love among the persons of the Trinity was so great from eternity that the Father determined to create a world of people who, though finite, would have personalities that reflected the Son. Being conformed to the Son, people could then share in the blessed holiness and joy of the Trinity's family life. And then he goes on to look at what this means and this idea of what it means to actually lead our families in worship. And we hearken back to passages in Deuteronomy, the idea of as you go, teaching, but there's also other aspects where we see that this is a true idea of responsibility that's given to fathers to lead their families in worship. And we see it laid out with figures like how Joshua brings this into his family and all the different ideas that he's going to bring. But in short, it's this idea of daily instruction in the Word of God, daily prayer to the throne of God, this idea of singing praises before God, and so much more. So again, what I would encourage you to do is if you want scriptural backgrounds for why you should do this, both in the Old and in the New Testament, what it will look like and the true benefits of what it can do to your family, I would highly recommend this book, Family Worship by Joel Beeke. It's a true treasure and concise little manual on how to go about family worship. Now, a few other books that we had at the conference that I would recommend are one here, and I'm not going to go into as much detail with it. I've been working my way through this one by Joel Beeke and James LaBelle, and it's titled Living in a Godly Marriage, right here. And one of the things that this book goes through is it looks at the fact that during the height of Puritanism, the Puritans wrote 29 different books on marriage. And what they did was they distilled those 29 books into one book on marriage. And some of the topics that they look at would be things like the institution and honor of marriage, the purposes and benefits of marriage, securing a good entrance into marriage, preserving the honor of marriage. Now think of some of these things, the actual institutions, the purposes. What does it even mean to say you're going to enter into marriage? Why would you do such a thing? What should it look like? How should you be prepared? What kind of spouse should you be looking for? And are they prepared? And then he looks at these ideas again of the mutual duties between both the husband and wife, but also he looks at the wife's duties, the husband's duties, and then the role that you'll see with the family. And one thing that I picked up from Joel Beeke at this conference is he said, the Puritans wrote 29 different books on marriage. He said, but it was interesting that in many respects, they followed a very similar pattern in the way that they talked about various topics, namely mutual duties, husband duties, wife's duties. And he lays out in this book many of those points of what it looked like and how the Puritans and the Reform movement really drove these home into the family. But what this book does beyond what his lectures do is he actually will give you more sort of study guide questions. So it's something that you can go through with your wife, with your family, and you can look at what the Puritans have to say about the concept of marriage. So again, this is a great resource. I'd love to dive into it more, but I refer you over to his other lectures. So again, right here, Living in a Godly Marriage. In fact, before we go, I just want to read one recommendation of this book by R.C. Sproul. He said this: the reason for the resurgence of interest in the Puritans today is found in their extraordinary devotion to the things of God and the depth of their understanding and exposition of sacred scripture. I welcome this series of books that make the Puritans even more accessible in our day on a variety of important but often neglected subjects. So great book to look at. I highly recommend it. Now, I want to look at one more book by Joel Beeke. If you can't tell, I've been reading books by Joel Beeke lately. But there's another book that they put together on, well, how do we actually do family worship? And I'm busy and maybe I don't feel prepared and I need a guide and I need some help. Well, they put together, and they being Joel Beeke was the general editor, Michael Barrett, and others with Reformation Heritage Books, this other book titled Family Worship Bible Guide, right here. And what they do with this book is they go through each chapter of the Bible, and they would expect that you would read that chapter of the Bible, and then it presents various topics for you to point out and discuss. And it's going to take the main points that they think you should pull from that chapter in order to disciple your family. And there are other videos online where they discuss this book. And some of the things that they discuss in it is the reality that we live in a world where time is an issue. So maybe preparation is something that you struggle with. But there's also a reality that, like I said, myself, I wasn't raised in a family with family worship. Now, I went to Bible college and seminary and, ended up getting a PhD and so forth. But it's not something that was like laid out and modeled before me in my own home. So there's some people that don't feel prepared to do such things. And what this book strives to do is to help both the busy father and maybe the unprepared father to be able to sit down and have a how-to guide for how to actually teach the scriptures to your family. So if that's something that interests you, I would highly recommend this little book. It's very affordable, as are all the rest. So, the first one's going to give you the theological foundations. The other one's going to give you the historical picture with very specific things from the Puritans. And then this is going to get you more into the big picture of the text of Scripture. So again, I highly recommend Family Worship Bible Guide by Joel Beeke. Now, for our remainder here, I just want to highlight 3 more books that were talked about. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail with them. But one of the best books that they did from the Puritan era on family and marriage that they discussed was by a figure named William Gouge. And it was a 1-volume series that they actually broke down into 3 different volumes. And what it is the first one here, I'm just going to point them out, is the first one's titled Building a Godly Home, A Holy Vision for Family Life by William Gouge. It's a nice little hardback edition here. He goes through some of the topics, like serving each other, particular challenges, or the particular callings of the wife's submission, headship in marriage, husbands in the love of Christ, and so much more. And it looks at children and the reality of this marital love and how do you raise and disciple children and so on and so forth. Now, another one that they look at that my wife and I have actually been reading was really their 2nd volume here, which is titled A Holy Vision for a Happy Marriage, again by William Gouge. These are all the same book. They just broke them down into 3 volumes according to sort of content and topics. And it looks at things very specific about every issue you might run into with husbands and wives and what's going to make a happy marriage. It's very complementarian in its approach, very biblical in its approach. It gives many examples of what that might look like and how to implement it. But last but not least is the final one that's titled Building a Godly Home, A Holy Vision for Raising Children. And this is a how-to guide on the specifics of what it means to raise children. For example, some of these would be children showing respect for parents, children getting parents' permission, children obeying parents' instruction and correction, children giving back to parents, children honoring father and mother in the Lord, parents loving, praying, and providing for children, parents nurturing, teaching, and training children, and so much more. I mean, directing them into adulthood and all the different topics. One of the things that they talked about here is that this is almost a how-to guide, and when all of them are brought together, there's almost no stone left unturned. So again, this was just a brief little video that I wanted to give you here. I hope that it appeals to you. If it does, and you find these resources of benefit to you, please like and subscribe to this channel. It really helps me know what you are looking for in different books that you may be looking for as we deal with different topics. So this is a different sort of video that we typically do, but in many respects, if people were to ask, what are we really focusing on and what have we been focusing on? Well, it's the reformation of our own family. And it's something that I want to provide to many of you so that you can have the same in your family. So again, please buy the books. These are really just a call for you to buy the literature, instill the literature, get into the Bible, love God, love your wife, love your family.